All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Dungan-Mott Music and Movie Podcast. I'm Devin Dunnigan, and here with me today, as always, is Mr. Stephen Mott. How you doing, brother?
Devin, the drummer great, James the Third. Thank you.
All righty, so today we are back after kind of trying to change up a little bit. We're back to kind of an older formation of things with an album review, which that's what we intend to do, is kind of do album reviews still, but also kind of split it up, do more kind of discussion episodes and stuff like that. But anyway, we are back today to review Ratt's 1984 debut studio album, full length studio album, Out of the Cellar. So this was produced by Beau Hill. This was recorded in 1983. It says on Wikipedia 83 to 84, but on looking in Stephen Piercy's book, it said that they finished up in 83 and then went on tour before the album came out in February of 1984. So that, and the album was released February 17th, 1984. Has 3 singles released from the record, and the original producer for this record was Tom Allom, who was known as the producer for Judas Priest. And then Beau Hill stepped in after he, I guess, was deemed unavailable. I didn't really see exactly what happened with that. I could have very well have been scheduling conflicts with Priest or something like that. But yeah, I mean, this is their debut studio record. They had put out the EP a year prior in '83, which was an independent thing, and they were managed at the time by Marshall Burrell, the nephew of comedian and actor Milton Berle. And it's just so interesting looking at this band. I mean, starting out and how the music scene was at this point. I mean, you had Motley Crue, who had put out Shout at the Devil and Too Fast for Love prior to this record coming out. Then you had Dokken. They were starting to make rumblings. This exact year was when Tooth and Nail came out, and that was when Dokken blew up really big. And then you kind of the big four to me has always been Motley Crue, Dokken, Ratt, and Poison. And Poison didn't come along until '86, even though I think they formed in like '85 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I discovered this record probably off the singles, and I kind of always knew who Ratt were, but yeah, I mean the singles. Then I went back and kind of got into the other parts of the catalog. Solid discography, I will say that. And I mean, to me, the EP is probably the best thing they've ever put out. I love the rawness of the EP, and some of that made it to this record, and I'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, the EP was kind of a raw, kind of Aerosmith inspired, Led Zeppelin inspired type album, and I'll be really glad when that comes to CD, which they've been talking about it for a while. I'd heard this year, but I don't guess it's ever going to come out because we're entering August at this point, and I mean the year's almost done and over with. But yeah, I mean, I discovered this band through the singles, then went back through the catalog, as I said, and kind of I like Ratt. I'm a fan of Ratt. I think they're an underrated band, in particular musical. I think they're a very underrated band musically. I think all across the board. I mean, they're one of the only bands of this caliber, like that kind of Sunset Strip Hollywood band type thing with 2 guitar players, because Poison didn't have one, Dokken didn't have one, even though Don Dokken could play guitar, and then Motley Crue had only 1 guitar player. So, I mean, yeah, there you go. But I mean, before we get into the episode or the kind of the meat of the episode here, I mean, Stephen, how did you discover Ratt? And I mean, also just talking about it beforehand, we've done a Ratt episode way back on the DTM podcast, which I recommend you go check that album out too, because it's very interesting. But yeah, I mean, how did you discover Ratt, and what's your kind of opening thoughts on this record?
Well, I mean, I tell you, the Dancing Undercover was quite an interestation of an episode, and I did not care for that album. And this is the first album of Ratt I've actually cared for even 1%. So, I mean, this is not my only, experience of Ratt, but my first experience was not good, and this is a lot way better. So, that's all I got to say. I'm Pete.
All righty. So, I mean, we can go ahead and dive on into the record. I mean, this is a short and sweet album, 37 minutes and some change. I mean, to me, and that was a note I'd put down in my notebook here, was kind of the CD age discussion that I made before. Like, bands seemed to put more into an album way back in the day than they do now, because if you look at it nowadays, you could fit 80 minutes onto a CD pretty much, 79 minutes, 80 minutes, whatever. So you can put pretty much everything you put to a studio, you can bring in and do an album with. And I mean, not to say long albums aren't good, and I've actually warmed up to longer albums here more recently, but I think back in the day when you had kind of like vinyl being the big selling point, or cassette, I mean, even to an extent, cassette and 8-track, I think bands tended to work more on their albums and kind of push themselves a whole lot more than they did with CD, where they could just go in during the CD age and say, okay, here's 20 songs. Let's kind of cut down to about 14, 15 songs to throw it out here. I mean, Kiss were guilty of it. Dio, to an extent, was guilty of it. Black Sabbath. I mean, all these bands were doing like long albums, especially in the 90s, but even in the late 80s. And everybody says Hysteria by Def Leppard was kind of the album that really pushed that. So, I mean, we could go ahead and dive on into this album with the very first track on here, Wanted Man. So, this album starts out with this kind of reverse drum intro, which I really love. It's really cool, and that's something that I always tend to forget with this record, is that it has electronic drums as well, and that's probably the most interesting thing about it, because it's very of the time. So the getting back to what I was saying, so the drum intro I really enjoy. I love the heaviness of the song, maybe the heaviest song that they ever did. And this has been one of their go-to openers over the years. I believe even Stephen Pearcy opens the shows with this song. And musically and vocally, it kind of reminds me of Judas Priest, kind of like Rob Halford's delivery. And this could have been a Priest song. I would really be interested to hear Judas Priest re-record this song with Halford. And this was a second single, and a video was made, and this was also co-written. This is the interesting thing about it, by Joey Christofoulou, Fulili, something like that. I cannot read my chicken scratch, but that's the most interesting thing about this, because he briefly subbed for Juan Crucier, and I believe he may be on the EP. It seems like there's like one song on that EP that's not Juan Crucier, but because Juan Crucier was briefly part of Dokken for a time. And let me see, I'm looking it up right here. Joey Cristofanilli, that's it. I could not read my handwriting at all. And yeah, it's interesting that he has a co-write on this song. And I mean, like I said, just amazing opener, great song overall. So Stephen, take Wanted Man.
I muted myself. So the thing is, the chorus reminds me of War Machine by Kiss. This is the start of an ongoing trend from this record. It reminds me of Overall, Animalized by Kiss. It's like, listen to this record out of the cellar, listen to Animalized Kiss back to back. You'll see what I mean. Other than that, it's not my favorite song on the album, much less in the world. I It's not one of the worst, but I'm just like, okay. I mean, they're just trying to do this Western theme with a music video, and I'm like, well, yeah, Wanted Man, whatever, cheesy. Like, just go. Just stop. So that's it. That's all I got to say. The song is just mediocre, so bye.
All righty. And now that you say that, I can actually totally see that with the War Machine connection. It does kind of sound like War Machine. Now that you mentioned that's what I like about doing these episodes. You have kind of a different perspective going into it, and I have a different perspective. I guess that's the point of a review like this. But yeah, the second track on here though, so You're in Trouble. So this is right off the bat a great groove with the bass and drums. This song was also on the EP, and that's what a lot of people I don't think realize is that not only was a song that comes up later on the album that it was on the EP, but also this song was on the EP. And that guy, Joey Cristofanilli, who I had mentioned a minute ago and screwed up his name, he plays on the demo or the 83 EP version of it, a demo, whatever you want to call it. And it's a great song, great hooks, and to me, that's what makes a lot of these songs and the Ratt catalog as a whole is just kind of these hooky choruses and just sing along like you could just think of one of these songs and the chorus comes right up in your head. And some great guitar work all across this album. And this song in particular sounds a bit influenced by Def Leppard, like that early, like On Through the Night through Pyromania, Def Leppard, which Pyromania came out in '83 and was like and blew up. So I mean, they could have very well have been influenced by Def Leppard. And I've got a few more notes here later on that talks about some influences that they seemingly had. But yeah, like this song a lot. Another good one on this record. So Steven, take You're in Trouble.
Well, I mean, this is it's pretty good. The riff reminds me of the first song and the rest of this whole record. Let me try to explain it. So musically, it seems like they had a straight bass rhythm mainly for the let's just say the verse parts. They had like a steady bass rhythm, like with one note, not just rhythm, like a steady note, and then you just had a riff over it, and all the songs sounded almost not the same riff, but the same. They were written in the same exact vein, and I mean, I know you expect that from an album, of course, but I mean, to this, I mean, it was just like I was like, okay, this again, same exact rhythm, same chord. I mean, it's like same. I mean, come on now, come on, Kiss, seriously. I mean, and the reason I say come on, Kiss is because it reminds me of Kiss Animalized. So I don't know who copied who here, but somebody copied it. Copy and paste. Sugar my face. So no. So back to you, Devin.
Alrighty, so the next track on here is Round and Round. So this was the first single, and this also had a video, I believe, with Milton Berle in it actually. And it's either this one or Back for More, which is coming up. I can't remember exactly, but this is probably their best known song. It kind of had a comeback a couple of years ago when it was on that Geico commercial where they said they had a rat problem and they showed Ratt playing in like a kitchen of a house. And that was with the different version that was going around for a little while that no longer exists pretty much. This is kind of the perfect pop metal song. It has just the right amount of kind of commercial viability and then combined with heaviness. And the production of this album is really, really cool. And that's what I think brings out, in particular, this song is the production. Like you could have had And it would be interesting to hear this album kind of with the rawness of the EP, but I don't think it would have worked commercially at that time. That's the thing about it. And you can hear like a little bit of, I don't know if it's guitar effects or synthesizers or keyboards or what it is, but like during the little breakdown before it gets into the chorus, it sounds, you can briefly hear it, which I listened to the 2014 Rock Candy remaster, and you can very, very kind of vaguely hear these keyboards or like guitar synthesizers or something in there. And I mean, that's also, I mean, just talking about the musicality of this band. I mean, I don't think any of the band members get enough love. I kind of mentioned it earlier in the review here, but like, I mean, you have two great guitarists with Robin Crosby and Warren DeMartini. I don't think either one of those guys get enough love. Juan Croucier is a great bass player, very, very great bass player. And then Bobby Blotzer, while not the like, he's not like a Neil Peart or anything like that, but like he does the job. And then Stephen Pearcy has this kind of snarl in his voice, like he's very different. But if you really notice, like later on in the '80s, when like you had like Cinderella and like Slaughter, Mark Slaughter's band, Winger, like you could kind of tell like those guys was trying to be Stephen Pearcy in a way, with especially in their vocal delivery. But yeah, I mean, underrated band altogether. I will say that. And I do want to talk about their discography when we get to the end of the review or whatever, and some other things also. But getting back on topic here, so yeah, just to me a perfect pop song. I mean, it's a pop metal masterpiece in my opinion, and it means so much to that kind of period of time, and it's the reason that, I mean, it's just as viable today as it was back then. It's timeless, pretty much. So, Stephen, take Round and Round.
I don't know. I didn't know my mic was muted. It was not, it wasn't. So, number 3. This is supposed to be the big song on the album, but it flops over and dies and turns into a coyote suddenly. So that was my notes verbatim. I mean, if this album was a car, it would be a Dodge Caravan. Because believe me, it's not gonna get more than halfway down the road before it quits. So, yeah, this is just no. This is supposed to be like the quintessential whatever. No, you can forget me ever listening to this song again. So, I have nothing for this. I mean, somewhere down the line, these people went, oh, well, let's just all try to be like Van Halen. These are all mini Eddie Van Halens and these 80s guitar rock hair bands. And it's just ridiculousness. No one is no one. So it is what it ain't. Bye.
Oh my. And yeah, I mean, I will agree. Like Van Halen had such an influence on these bands. I mean, there's a reason like you had four guys, a good looking singer, a flashy guitar player, a kind of decent bass player, and a really good drummer. There's a reason for that. And that's Van Halen and Eddie Van Halen in particular. So the next track on here is In Your Direction. Another great song. This was written when the band was under the name Mickey Ratt, which is basically Ratt, like around 79, 80, something like that, 81. Something. I know they put out a CD of like early stuff here a few years ago. I think it's unauthorized, but it's out there. But anyway, it's a good song, another really good song. And this reminds me of 70s Aerosmith and the way it's kind of the overall music of the song and Stephen Pearcy's delivery and melody. So, Stephen, take In Your Direction.
She wants money. I don't know. So this at least is better than lack of communication is all I can say. I mean, I want to have like a communication with these songs that go on for the rest of this album. So, bye.
All righty. So the next track on here, speaking of, is She Wants Money. So you was talking about Kiss earlier. This reminds me of Kiss, and it reminds me of like something off of Rock and Roll Over or something from the '70s. It gives me that kind of vibe, and this is also notable because this is one of the two songs I believe it is. No, there's more than that, but this was written only by Juan Crucier, and that there's one song on here. It's either this one or another one coming up that Juan Crucier helped write or wrote by himself. And he talks about it in the Behind the Music documentary that he knew when he brought the lyrics to one of these songs to the band and Stephen Pearcy took it and changed it. He was like, I knew it was going to be difficult working with this guy. I was like, okay, I guess. I mean, you're in a band with this guy, like you've got to expect him to kind of change something around. But either way, I mean, I enjoy the song. I think it's another great song on this record. So Stephen, I mean, yeah, Stephen. I almost called you Stephen Pearcy, but Stephen takes She Wants Money.
Hello, I'm Stephen Pearcy. She Wants Money, failure to me, but not horrible. So again, I just don't know. Theoretically, I mean, the production is not bad. The idea of this album is not bad. It's just poppy, and it's just a different direction from what I remember Dancing Undercover being. Dancing Undercover, it seemed like I remember it being more of a hard direction. And this is more of a pop direction completely for this record. So that's it. But this particular song I don't like. From here on out, this album goes to the toilet and it never comes back. So, no.
All righty. So the next track on here is Lack of Communication. So this song, another really good one on this record, and this is the opener of side two, I believe it is. Let me make sure. Yeah, this is the opener of side two, and it's interesting looking at this song because it has a little bit of lead vocals from Juan Crucier, who was one of the writers on this song. And it's like I said earlier, it's either this song or the previous song that had the whole big blow up between Juan Crucier and Stephen Pearcy. I can't remember which one it is. And I saw on Wikipedia, like, it said this song and She Wants Money. It said both have original lyrics on Juan Crucier's website, but then it said citation needed, which is the reason I didn't put anything down in my notes about it because I mean, it could be something false. I'm not sure. I didn't bother to check, to be honest. But this was the third single, and this was released in late 1984, I believe November. And I don't think a video was made for this song. But yeah, it is interesting though to hear another lead vocalist, and it was also on the EP. Like there was some little trade offs between Stephen Pearcy and Juan Crucier on the songs. I believe it was you think you're tough, and I believe it may have been on Tell the World that's on there that there was some trade offs. But here it's very brief during the pre-chorus, but it is there, and I'd never noticed it until listening close this time around during the preparation for this episode. So Stephen, take lack of communication.
Well, they must have had a lack of communication when making this record because, or no, this song in particular. Oh my God. I mean, it's a train wreck. I mean, seriously, man. Like seriously of my serious and my seriosity and my curiosity. the complexity of my nothingness. So, the backup vocals. I don't need to say anything else. You can barely hear them. They're just stupid. Like, why, man? I just want to know why that they listened back to this and was like all sitting around going, "Oh man, this rocks! Oh my god!" Kiss, Taki. Thanks. Bye.
Alrighty, so then we move to the next track, Back for More. So this is another re-recording from the EP, and it's edited down just a little bit. In particular, you can pick out the beginning of it. After the acoustic intro, it goes into the main riff and build up of the song for like a couple of measures or so, and then it gets into the verse. Here it goes into it just a little bit and then kicks right into the verse of the song. And I prefer the EP version. You can hear a little bit of the keyboards in there, or mix. It sounds, it's either like guitar synth or like effects of some kind. But you can briefly, it could have been effects that Stephen Piercy had on his vocals or something that caused it to kind of bleed into the mix. I'm not real sure, but this did have a video, and it's I put on here the return of the backwards drums. It's, you can hear it very briefly during the song, I believe during right before the guitar solo or something like that. And this was not released as a single, oddly enough, but this is one of their most well-known songs. So Stephen, take Back for More.
I just don't know, man. I hate it. I don't know. Back to you.
All righty. So the next track on here is The Morning After. So this is the one song on the record that I think is fillerish. And even though I do enjoy it kind of feels like this could have been left off the record. It feels like the one song that doesn't sound completely finished, which I know Steven probably thinks all of them do. But yeah, I it's a great song, but it just it could be just a filler song to me. So, and then musically, it reminds me of Achilles' Last Stand by Led Zeppelin, in particular with the little gallop they're doing, and it also reminds me kind of melodically, Crazy Nights era Kiss. Just melodically and kind of where the music goes, in particular with the chorus and all. So yeah, that's my thoughts, Stephen. What are yours?
Uh, what song are we on? No, I'm just playing. All the riffs on this album are very alike, with a constant bass line and a riff over that, especially the verses. But in this song, the solo was really cool, but they needed a lot more of this variety type stuff throughout the album, because all these songs are kind of fit from the same exact mold, and about halfway through you catch on to it. Well, actually, I caught on to it about the second song, but I didn't realize that they were going to keep it going until halfway through it. No.
All righty. So the next track on here is I'm Insane. So this should have been the closer, in my opinion. And this was from the previous band, and I'm probably butchering the name, but Mac Madia is, I guess, the way it was pronounced. But this was a band Robin Crosby was in, and he brought this song from there. And I believe, yeah, he is the lone writer on this song. So yeah, I dig it. Another good song. And there's a great video out there from Ralph Vieira on the Phase Linear channel, which is worth checking out as well, just a shout out to him. So, Steven, what do you think of I'm Insane?
Well, I am. The opening riff reminds me for the world, here you go, Devin, of Under the Gun Kiss. So, just kind of let that cook your noodle a little bit. But I, but I really like the pre-chorus. I thought that said precocious. Pre-chorus riff, but stereotypical to me. Typical. I don't know. So I'm insane is pretty much what I think about this record. After I've been after I've been standing in the heat all day, and when I come home and have a headache, this record is like the opposite of what I would go to listen to. So bye.
All righty, and now that brings us to the final track on the record, Scene of the Crime. So this is another song from that Mac Medea band or Mac Madia band, whatever it is. This should have been the opener of side 2 to me, and I'm Insane should have been the closer. I love the guitar. It's almost like a harmonizer during the fade of the song, and the groove overall with the drums and kind of the verse rhythms, it reminds me of AC/DC a whole lot. I could have seen AC/DC recording something like this, and of course, a much harder manner than this, not as polished. But yeah, that is it. That is the album. So, Stephen, take Scene of the Crime.
The Scene of the Crime. This plane is going to take us all the way to the scene of the crime. The scene of the crash. The scene of the crime. This record reminds me of Animalized Kiss to a T, capital T. T stands for damn, by the way. As for songwriting and production, listen to the two albums back to back, later two. You'll see exactly what I mean. W-A-T. Not a great song at all. Extremely repetitive. They do nothing but sing the chorus 20,000 times over again. They want to be this epic great ending on already a mediocre album, but it just comes off as this lifeless piece of shit. So, back to you, Devin.
So, that is the album, and overall, for my conclusion, I think this is their best full-length album. I do think the EP is their best record, and I'll give this a 5 out of 5. And I'm sure that's not what Steven's going to give it. So, Steven, what is your conclusion about the record, and what do you rate it?
I'm thinking, not about this album. So, I really rate this thing like 2 out of 10. I give them 2 credit for the idea, but their idea was not original. So, I give them, some brownie points for just writing their own stuff, I guess. I give credit for that always, but not doing covers like Kiss. But regardless, I just don't know. Like I said, this band is basically another mini Van Halen band, and I just don't know, man. It just makes me cringe to hear some of the stuff they do, not the guitar players, and I'm just like, really? So back to you.
All righty, and I just wanted to kind of talk real quick. And I was reading through the booklet earlier, and I've heard of the whole thing of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon before. Let's try out 6 degrees of Kiss. So I was reading through the booklet, and some names that stuck out to me were Barry Levine, who was Kiss's photographer, Nils Lausauer, who he photographed Kiss some. He also photographed Van Halen a pretty good bit. And also Grover Jackson, who helped get Mark St. John in Kiss. And so that's three people right there that stick out to me. And then some other names here. These are not related to Kiss really. Tawny Katane was the front cover model, and she, of course, was known later on for being in Whitesnake's videos and marrying David Coverdale for a time. She was also the girlfriend of Robin Crosby, and I mean, rest in peace. Such a sad loss. And then also in here, Nikki Sixx of Motley Crue. This is the special thanks kind of thing. So Nikki Leader Sixx is leader in parentheses. Jakey Lee, who went on to be the lead guitarist in Ozzy. Kevin DeBro of Quiet Riot, and a whole group of other people that I've never heard of in my life. Doug Morris, I've heard of, and just reading through here, don't see anything else. But yeah, it really stuck out to me when I got to looking through these names earlier. And it says Ratt play Charvel / Jackson guitars and bass guitars. Bobby Blotzer plays Ludwig drums and pasty cymbals. So yeah, that's the Alex Van Halen special right there on drums. So yeah, that is the album. And I mean, we'll get into our quote unquote choice cuts of the week. I guess is what way it's going to be called. I wanted to get away from kind of the picks of the week thing, which is going to be the kind of same concept, but yeah, just kind of getting away from that name because it's taken by other people. I didn't want to be like a rip-off artist or anything. So, Steven, do you by any chance have a choice cut of the week?
My choice pick of the week.
That's
yeah. I did that just to trigger you, Devin. My pick of the week this week is The Walking Dead. So, and also for movie, for film, I'm at a loss right now because I'm just disgusted. There's an album called Prestigious Letomogonous by a band called Hagar Shiitake. So go listen to that. Let me know if you find it.
alrighty. And the bad thing is, what if that's really an album of some kind? So, my choice pick of the week here is going to be, and I've written down three of them. So since you went with a movie, I'm going to go with kind of a movie, or you went with a TV show, but I'm going to go with Detroit Rock City from 1999. So I had two albums also, but I'm not going to really talk about those. But that is my pick. I really enjoyed it. It's a fun comedy movie from that time period. It's a period piece, of course, and it's of course known as the Kiss movie. But yeah, that is it. That is the episode. We hope you all enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, leave us some feedback, support this YouTube channel, this podcast, and we hope you all get something out of it. We're just here to try to kind of divert your attention to something else in these crazy times in the world. So thank you all for watching. God bless you. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay frosty, and we will see you next time on another episode of the Dungan-Mott Music and Movie Podcast.